In terms of portamento, it's clear that that's part of the language for all of this repertoire at that time. And certainly what I hear on those early recordings is a mixture of the German style and the Franco-Belgian style. So I'd like to explore that mixture, but with the balance tipped towards the Franco-Belgian style. Certainly what both Allard and De Berriot say about portamento makes me think that they favoured staying on the same finger wherever possible and disguising the shift to a new finger, if that was part of the portamento, to shift to the new finger imperceptibly. And in terms of where to change bow, that's explored in terms of a desirable thing in De Berriot as being on the same bow for the whole shift. But what I think I hear on those early recordings is it's quite subtle the way they do the Franco-Belgian thing. So they don't move, I think they don't move to the new bow at the beginning of the shift. I think they do it after the shift has started. I find it quite imperceptible. So it's not.
So it's neither in the old bow or the new bow.
Sorry.
It's in.
It's
both
neither.
The
Yeah,
old
I think what they do is they start the shift and then they move to the new bow. So it has a very Franco-Belgian flavour, but it doesn't have that swooping sound that happens when you move to the new bow at the beginning of the portamento. So that's what I think I hear.
It might be good to sort of demonstrate some of these things as we...
Yeah, of course. Yeah. If I were to do... See what I mean? So to start on the old, to move to a new bow and start the portamento at the same time, you almost hear a reiteration of the starting note. And that is totally valid, I hear that. And then there's also the one which is more disguised that I've just been describing. So I can just describe it mainly as it sounds more swoopy the earlier you move into the new bow.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah. And then I also hear quite a lot of a little anticipatory note before the peak of a phrase and the end of a portamento. So which is very, very in the style of singing at the time. And I hear that a lot at the peaks of phrases. So that if it's a really long phrase, then the highest point of the phrase, I often hear that little anticipatory, like a grace note.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah. But that, of course, means changing bow after the portamento. It's as if there has been a change, rather than it being the same syllable, it's as if there's a change of word or syllable on the arrival note.
And as you're saying, it's the peak of the phrase, because they also talk about the messa di voce being across a phrase now, no longer in a note. So I think that's also part of the bow and how the bow does that we're coming from previous ones, we would do the messa di voces, but this is as a result of a sostenuto effect of this as well. So then the portamento is kind of adding to that
feeling
to
of
that messa di
yes,
voce.
yeah, and like an extended hairpin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind
Yeah.
of, I don't know, that it's sort of, I noted that too also in a lot of the markings, a lot of the hairpins are really long.
Yeah.
Especially in the FARRENC.
Yeah.
So I wondered if that's also an indicator of how the bow has to
help carrying
has
the
to
line.
help carrying the
Yeah.
notes longer
Yeah.
as well.
So yeah, I mean that's a really good point, because I'm sure that they were already having a preoccupation with line, but within that, the prosody that De Berriot talks about is really important. So that nuancing that comes from speech ultimately.
Well, it certainly made sense when you start thinking of poetry and how would you want to influence the poetry
Yes.
in using this, because otherwise it becomes a bit random about where you do a shift.
Yeah.
And it definitely helps when you know the length of the phrase and you know that it's at some point into the phrase and also some point going out of the phrase as well. So at the apex, but also I think I noticed a lot of the ones are on the way. So as you're saying what you want to say,
yes,
you're kind of using it to influence what the poetry, I guess, the text. You're using it to influence the text.
Yes.
But both on the way up and on the way down as well.
Yes. Yes.
Did you notice?
It's a kind of tension and release in itself,
Yeah.
isn't it? That comes from the words as well as the pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very sentimental. Like for
Yes,
me, it's
absolutely,
way more sentimental. The Franco-Belgian style.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Than the German style.
Yeah. So, and I'm finding it in my preparation. I'm finding it useful to focus on those three types of portamento that DeBerrio highlights. So the lively one.
Yes. Yes.
And then the which can happen within a very sentimental phrase. I'm finding it's helping me to mix up the type of portamento I do, even within a very sentimental or affectionate or plaintive phrase. So
also used in quick tempos, in other words.
Sorry.
Also used within quick tempos.
Yes. Yeah.
And a quick portamento then.
A quick portamento. Yeah.
So depending on
it gives
the character.
it life rather than.
So just depending on the character.
Yeah, but that's also an unusual place to think, because it's not the sentimental moment, it's not the languid moment,
it's a different function. Yeah.
Energized moment in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, DeBerrio talks about avoiding doing a portamento up to a peak and then immediately down. Again, but you hear that all the time in the recordings.
But you hear different speeds though. That's what I noticed. They never would do the same speed up and the same speed down.
Yeah.
So that's what sort of, I think they technically get away with doing it in both directions, because it seems like it's a different portamento.
Yes.
The one that goes up to the one that goes down. Like the choice is.
Yeah.
You're saying something different.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm finding that to think of maybe the ascent being either lively or charming, and then the descent being a bit more plaintive or the other way around.
Yeah,
just to think of a
helps.
character helps. I'm finding it's helping me know how to create the portamento, both in terms of speed and weight of bow.
Yeah.
So, in terms of DeBerrio saying those things, don't we have to also keep in mind that the truth is somewhere probably in between the recordings because he's talking to students. Yeah. He's addressing the Brussels Conservatory students, and so obviously while they're learning to do those things, that professionals probably did more.
But he also emanated, is that the word?
Yeah.
Emanated that style.
Yeah.
And it's his style
he's
talking about.
Yeah, he developed
he developed it. So,
There's
they're all going to take a different example of it.
And in terms of intervals, I certainly hear it across all intervals, ascending and descending.
Okay.
They're particularly fond of, in the really earliest recordings, I hear a lot of descending seconds. So, for example, in the theme of the FARRENC, the fourth bar, I think it would be good to do one between the A and the G sharp.
I put it in.
Yeah.
Immediately, which I hadn't.
Which I didn't do last time. I hadn't thought of it, but actually.
I was the same. I literally heard a lot of those drop-offs on those.
Yeah.
And time, also time. But what I find is that to get the right feeling of the portamento, you have to start it earlier. Like in your brain, you have to start it earlier, and your finger has to start it earlier.
Yeah.
Because I think that's our danger, is that we start them late, and then you get this swipe effect.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to get onto the beat of the next beat, and it's like we have to pull time out of the previous note to be able to give it the space to shift.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's what they train, if that's the process of how they practiced it. I'm not sure.
I think from the recordings, it's clear that they did that. You can hear singers certainly moving off notes very quickly.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the peaks of phrases.
No.
But
No.
But for example, the end of the first bar of the theme in the FARRENC, I think they'd move off that C pretty quickly.
Yes, but interesting. Listening to that recording of the Franck sonata, he doesn't use a single portamento for the first 6 bars almost. Like you would think that theme would give you every right to go up and down, but from what I noticed from listening once or twice, it didn't. And it struck me because I was immediately going, I can go all over the place, and then he didn't. He played really, and then just at the very end you get this one.
Yeah.
So I was also questioning whether whether the beginning doesn't have any, except for that falling second at the end. I don't know. Again, we're just taking examples of repertoire and then defining it and saying, okay, what was applied in this piece? I don't know. Maybe it's just a case of us experimenting and seeing what we think.
Yeah.
But did you? I was challenged by that as well. That it wasn't always.
It's not an automatic.
No, it's
reflex.
not at the beginning necessarily.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's one thing. We could decide not to do one between bar 1 and 2. On the first rendition, perhaps we could do one on the repeat.
You could do it differently on the repeat.
Because we're well into the journey. So that could be a concept that they had, which was that they'd use more portamento as the emotional context increased.
You know, this idea that the portamento doesn't exist in sacred music. And I wondered, for me, the last movement feels like sacred music, like the opening section with the strings.
Yeah.
And I wondered if that was an exception to the idea of portamento in the... it might just be me reading that, but it feels more...
The fact that it's a fugue as
yes, well, I guess
highlights that.
Coming from the serious
So,
side that we don't do any... Because they were really strict about that. No portamento when it's sacred music. So I think maybe that could also help us to find, like you say, character differences.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that I observed.
So so the first section could be
just the first section,
and then when it gets to the Dolce,
Dolce and Cantabile, we could add.
Exactly that he's really specifically written in Cantabile at that moment afterwards that we could add it in.
Yeah, that makes sense.